Okay, in this video I'm going to demo my workflow for wet scanning on Epson scanners using the VuScan holder. There's going to have a series of videos on how to make these scans. The first one is going to be how to do the actual wet mounting. The second one is concerned with using VuScan software, which I feel like dramatically improves the Epson scanner. We're also going to use Color Perfect to process our raw scans for both black and white and color. If you use the VuScan holder, VuScan software, and Color Perfect, I feel like you're going to get the very best scan that you can. I prefer it a great deal over the Imicon scanner, or the Hasselblad scanner as it's now called. Okay, first thing you notice when you get the VuScan holder is that it has got these weird little plastic screws around the edge. This is for focusing your holder. One of the problems that the Epson scanners have is that the focus point above the platinum glass can vary from one scanner to the next. And so the idea with this particular holder, which it addresses I think very well, is that you're going to start out by lowering, or rather zeroing out, all of these screws. You're going to make sure that they're completely flat, put it on a nice piece of glass, make sure it doesn't rock back and forth at all. And you're going to take the hex wrench and you're going to raise maybe one full turn to start each one of those 8 individual screws. Then you'll take the negative that's hanging from the bottom of this glass, put it in the scanner, you'll make a test scan. You don't have to make a huge 4x5 scan or as big as whatever negative that you've got. You just make a small scan. You label them. So the first scan I would make would be like one full turn. I then do another scan of that same negative and sitting in the same place on the glass, but I would come in and I would make a quarter turn on each one of the individual screws. So the process is we're going to make a series of scans and we're going to slowly raise the scanner until we find the accurate focus point, going up a quarter turn each time and labeling all of the different scans. And once we get all the scans done, we'll go back and give them a little bit of sharpening and do some examination and try and find the proper height where we get the best focus. Now, like I said before, the Epson holders are getting a little bit better, but they're still not as good as I think the VuScan holder. There's 2 ways to buy the VuScan holder. You can get a glass, and in this case I actually have the glass that has optical glass on one side, and that is for making your wet scans. But if you prefer not to do the wet scans, you can actually just tape your negative to the other side of this glass. This is a piece of anti-Newton ring glass. It prevents you from getting those little weird swirly marks on where the glass is in perfect contact with the negative. So either way works fine. I feel like the wet scan gives me just a little bit more smoothness. It'll definitely cut down on your dust spotting time. I find them both to be very close. I get a tiny little bit more of a benefit from doing wet scanning. Okay, so when you get the VuScan holder, you get these little pieces of plastic, and I basically will use this as a mask as I scan. I'm also going to use it to help me position the negative correctly as I do the wet scanning workflow. Make sure that when you cut this out, I probably just put a negative down there and tape it in place, and then cut about a ½ inch outside the negative area. What we're going to do is we're going to tape our negative to the glass and then put a piece of optical mylar with wet mounting fluid. Then we're going to put the plastic mask on top. When I started scanning, I noticed I was getting really great results, but I found that when I was scanning color, I noticed it especially then, but I was getting a little bit of a red flare in 4 discrete increments coming in from the edges. It's most strong here and then sort of fading as it went into the interior part of the negative. Took the negative carrier out, put it on the light table, and I'm looking at where the flare is, and I noticed there are these 4 big finger holes. So I made this extra mask to put on top once everything is all ready to go on top of the platen in the scanner. And you'll notice that this gets rid of any extraneous flare. And this is something that the Epson scanner holders don't have. They do a pretty good job of getting rid of most of it, but they have some big areas where light just comes in and spills all over the place. by getting rid of all the extraneous light, I found not only a really great improvement in the color, but I also noticed that the scans were a lot smoother and I had better mid-tone contrast. So this lives over here by the scanner. It goes on right as we put, right before we actually make our scan. So to go over the wet scanning part, this is going to go back on the scanner. To make wet scanning easier, I've taken a page out of the drum scanner workflow and I've created myself a little mounting station. I'm going to make sure that I've got the optical clear glass. I'm going to clean it one last time. Our process is we're going to use cami mounting fluid, this regular drum mounting fluid. We're also going to use the mylar sheets that are made for your drum scanner, and I like these sheets a lot. One of the reasons that they're, I think, really awesome is that they come with a nice interleaving sheet for each sheet of film. Now I usually cut these in half, but then I'll also need to cut about an inch off the length. So I get 2 4x5 or medium format scans out of each sheet. So I'm going to leave the paper intact, and that's the last thing I'm going to remove as I make our little mounting fluid sandwich. So it's a good idea to have a nice brush. I always make sure to clean the negative before I get ready to do any mounting. So I've actually taken my film cleaner, my PEC 12 cleaner, and my PEC pads, and I've given this a really nice clean first. I always use the mask on the underneath side so that I make sure that I get the negative on the glass in the proper way. It also helps me keep it a little bit square. So I know where to put the negative. We're always going to scan with the emulsion side facing up. If you can't remember, it is the dollar side. Okay, so we're going to go right there. I'm going to put just a tiny little bit of solution on the glass, about maybe 1 or 2 cc's. I'm going to start at one end and just kind of roll it into the solution. Right. Let's try this again. Now, about 1 or 2 cc's on top of the negative. The last thing I do before I lay this down is I remove that plastic and I'll roll it down as well. One of the things you want to get worked out beforehand is you're going to need, well, I'll just call it a paper towel that's also a mop. You use this roller and very, very gently just put a tiny, tiny little bit of pressure and roll the excess solution into that paper towel. And this keeps me from getting it all over the place. If I mess up and I get some of the solution everywhere, it's not the end of the world. We just grab a PEC pad. Whoops. And you can clean this up as much as you want. If you pull on the edges and ruin that seal with the fluid, then I would just start over. One of the other things I like to do is to use masking tape and make sure I get a really nice, oops, there we go. Make sure I get a really nice edge and also get no flare right up against the edge of the film. So, without pulling up on the masking tape, I just burnish that down with my fingernail, the back side of my fingernail rather. Do all 4 edges. And to me this is a really nice advantage because I can get perfectly all the way out to the outer edges of my negative area. I don't have to worry about that horrible Imicon film holder cropping a lot of important information. So the important part of this process is not to pull up on the tape. If you mess up the tape, or you mess this up, it's not a big deal. You just start over. You're probably going to mess this up a few times getting started, but you get onto it pretty quickly and it doesn't take so long once you kind of figure it out. Last step is I'm going to check and see if I've got any massive air bubbles. If I've got something that's really big, I would reconsider doing this whole process over again. I think we're looking pretty decent. So the last thing I'm going to do is make sure this piece of glass is ready to go. There's no problems with it, or rather there's no dust on it. I bring it over here to the scanner, drop it in there, put that final mask on top, and then we'll begin using the VuScan software. After I've done my scan, bring this back. Use a razor blade just to grab the corner. Now this is cami mounting fluid. It's very volatile, so don't smoke while you do this. This is probably going to be dry in about 2 or 3 seconds. Once this is dry, I'll clean the glass every time in between each scan. But the first thing I'm going to do now is clean the light table, get myself a fresh peg pad, and clean my negative as quickly as I can. Just very gently clean both sides. I'm using this razor blade, but I'm being very careful not to do any cutting of the negative itself. There we go. Alright, let this dry for a minute and then put it back in its sleeve or its negative envelope. Alright, so on to the next video, which will be using VuScan in Color Perfect.